quick summary here. Okay. Kumlan Ablat Gemara, Shuatah Gudach. It is Motzei Shabbos Kedush Pasha Shoftim. Today's daf is Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, continuation of the Gemara Daf Nun Ches Amud Beis. And we're talking about the last few pages, and actually the next few blocks we'll be talking about the obligations between the husband and the wife, the husband to the wife, and the wife to the husband. And we've learned about the earnings of a wife that they go to the husband, and as a result of that, he has to provide for her. Right? That's how Shmuel learns. And we therefore had an argument in the Gemara a couple of days ago, whether a wife can say to the husband, like Huna says, don't provide for me, I'll take care of myself. Shloki says she cannot do that, and Huna says you can. So in the Mishnah, we had a discussion. If the husband decides to consecrate, to make hegdish, the earnings of his wife. Now, later on in the Mishnah, we're going to learn that a wife has to earn, I guess she has to invest and put into the marriage the equivalent of making together some wool, the value or the weight of 5 sloim. And that's what she owes to him. So if he decides to make that hegdish, he can. So he makes that hegdish. What do you call it? She can continue eating, and the Mishnah says it doesn't become hegdish. And we explained is talking about a case where she can say to the husband, "Don't provide for me," and therefore he has no rights over it. Therefore he cannot consecrate it. What about in the second half of the Mishnah talks about a case where it's moisa. She made an excess of those of the minimum that she has to make. Rameir says it does become hegdish, and Rabbi Yochanan Sadler says it does not become hegdish. The extra does not become hegdish. So we wanted to understand what's going on over here. So we had an argument between Rav and Shmuel on one hand, and we had Ada bar Rav on the other hand. Where Rav and Shmuel said that when does it become kaddish? According to Rameir, you can make it hegdish, but when? Only after she passed away. So then he inherits all of her belongings. So that's when it becomes kaddish. And Abad Barav said, no, even while she's alive, he has the right to make it hegdish. So we're trying to understand the scenario here. Why one of them says, Rabbi Shmuel says he cannot make it hegdish while she's alive, and Abad Barav says he can. And we said that in the place, the way we understood initially, in the place of the earnings, of the fact that he provides for her, he gets all the earnings. He gives her a stipend, an extra stipend, so that she can spend and do whatever she wants with it. And for that, he gets her excess. So we said that we're talking about a case here where we got one of them and we didn't, he's providing for her, but he's not giving her that excess amount. And therefore, we understand Rabbi Shmuel very well. He providing for her, so the earnings, he has a right over, but he is not giving her that excess. He has no right over her. He has no right over her excess. He's not giving the stipend. He has no right over that. And therefore, while she's alive, he cannot consecrate it. But once she passes away, then everything that excess becomes consecrated. However, Rabbi Ada disagreed. He held that the excess that she makes is in place of the food that he provides for her. And since the fact is that he is providing food for her, so therefore he has a right over the excess. And if he makes it kodesh, it becomes kodesh straight away. And then the Gemara explains, so why are they arguing? Why does Rav Shmuel say that the excess is tied to the extra stipend that he gives her? And why does Ada bar Rav say that the excess is tied to the food? And we explained that extra, that which is most common is tagged to that which is most common. He has to provide food. Everybody has to provide food for their wife, so that's the most common. And she earns the bare minimum. That's also the most common. So they two are tagged together. That's Rav Shmuel. The excess is not, the extra spending money is not so common, and therefore the fact that she earns more than what the bare minimum is also not so common. Therefore, that makes sense. However, Rav says no. Anything which has a fixed amount is tagged to a fixed amount. The excess, the extra stipend that he pays has a fixed amount, a more kesef. And the earnings that she's obligating her husband also has a fixed amount. That the weight of 5 sloim. On the other hand, the amount of food that he gives her doesn't really have a fixed amount. Food fluctuates in price all the time. and the excess of earnings, and so on and so forth, are not tied together. Therefore, they're tied together. That's what we basically said. So what's going? So Adam says that the amount of food, what do you call it? The amount of food is tied with her excess. Because how much does she make excess? Who knows? There's no fixed amount, and therefore that's what's tagged together. Okay, so that's what we're up to. Up to Mesaveh, about 8 lines on the top of the page, and we're gonna go back to a brisa that we learned before. Mesaveh asks a question. It says in the brisa, Tiknu mezainas, they made a special institution that he should provide for his wife, tachas ma'asideh, because her earnings go to him. So it's clear that the food that he provides for her is tagged to the earnings that she makes. And therefore, as a result of that, we can only conclude the excess that she earns is tied to the stipend, the extra stipend that he gives her, which is exactly like Rabbi Shmuel said. Says the Gemara, the other opinion of Adam Rabba says a word missing here. Say tachas say that the mezainas that he provides for her is connected to the excess of her earnings. Okay, we'll just redefine the Bryce. Toshma, come in here. It says it says like this: if he does not give her that extra stipend that she can spend it on anything she wants for her own personal needs, then it says clearly then her earnings belong to her. So we see from this place that the earnings is tagged to the stipend, like Rav Ada Barava, not like Rabbi Shmuel that says that the earnings are tagged to the zainas that he provides for her. Says the Gemara again, Ema, we're going to have to revise and say, say that if he doesn't give her the stipend, then her excess, the excess amounts that she makes, belongs to her. Add the word Moisa. So the Gemara, how can you even say that? How can you add a word there? But let's look at the context. It spells it out later on there and it says, Bahi Oisalai, what is the provisions? What does he have to make for him? Mishkal Chomesh Loyim. It seems like it's continuing to explain because it says in the beginning, if he doesn't give her the stipend, then Maisi Yedeh Shalah, her earnings are hers. And then the Mishnah says, Mahi, what is Maisi Yedeh? And it sounds like the Mishnah is continuing to explain what Maisi Yedeh is. So don't add, how can you add the word Maisi when we're actually explaining Maisi Yedeh? It says, what is the Maisi Yedeh? She has to make the weight of 5 sloim, shasi, which is the vertical thread, because that's much harder to make. Be Yehud in Yehuda, in the area, the region of Yehuda, that's what it is. The weight of 5 sloim, that's the standard. So a question. So it's clear we're talking about Maisi, her earnings, and it says if he doesn't give her the stipend, he doesn't get her earnings. So it's clear the two are tagged together. Says the Gemara, Hachikam. This is how you should understand the Mishnah. No, what's the stipend is tagged to the excess. But how do we know what is considered excess? So we need to know, first of all, what is considered her obligation, and then we can determine what is excess. And that's what the Mishnah is saying. What are the terms of her obligation that she has to pass on? The late, that's if we can know, then we can know what the excess is. Mishkol, and we answer Mishkol Chamesh Shloim Shasiba Yehuda, the weight of 5 Shloim of the vertical one in Yehuda, Shein Esas Shloim Galil, which is the equivalent of the in Galil of the weight of 10 Shloim. So bottom line is we can modify the Mishnah, we can understand the Mishnah that when it says if you refuse to give a stipend, what don't you earn, what don't you get anymore? The excess. Even though the Mishnah talks about the actual earnings, because that's how we can determine what the excess is. Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel goes back and says the halacha Rabbi Yechon Asandla. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir says that if he decides to consecrate the excess, it becomes kodesh. Rabbi Yechon Asandla says it does not. You cannot consecrate the excess because it's not here yet. It's not bola olam, and therefore the halacha is like Rabbi Yechon Asandla. So we're understanding because it's a dover shaloi bola olam. It's something that has not existed yet. It's not here. The excess is extra. It's not here, and therefore he cannot consecrate a dover shaloi bola olam. Says the Gemara. So you're telling me the halacha v'chmasanda, which means that you paskin that you cannot consecrate something which is not in existence. So the Gemara has a question. Yeah. Because Because remember, Shmuel, Rav and Shmuel both said that what do you call it? That when Rav Meir says it becomes holy, he was not talking about today. He was not talking about while they were alive, while she's alive. He was talking about only because he didn't give the stipend, the husband doesn't own it yet. It's only talking about after she died. So in other words, we're talking about something that is not in existence. If she died, after she died, so Dover Shaloi Bola Olam, it's not in existence. And Rabbi Yochanan Sandler therefore says that it does not become consecrated. And then obviously the crux of their argument is, can you sanctify something that is not here yet? According to Rabbi Meir, yes, you can, because nobody's talking about while she's alive, because that excess you have no rights to because you're not giving her the stipend. You're talking about after she dies and the husband inherits her, so everything that he talked about previously will now become sanctified. All the earnings that she's excess earnings she still has. So and Rabbi Yochanan says it does not become sanctified, which means that Shmuel rules that something which is not in existence, you cannot consecrate. You can only consecrate something, make something holy that's in front of you, or that's here, present, not if it's not here. And we have a problem with that. From another ruling for Shmuel, where it seems to say that you can sanctify something that is not in existence. And what's that? Says the Gemara, the Shmuel actually say that, but now we learned elsewhere, it says, if a woman says to her husband, Koinim is an expression of saying that this should become forbidden to you to have any pleasure from, just like a carbon. So if he says to her, Koinim shani oisel lepich, I make a vow that you should not have any benefit from anything that I make, that I produce, it should be forbidden to you in your mouth. So the first opinion says, Einoi tzarich lahafer, that you don't even have to annul, because generally the husband has a 24-hour period or the entire day to annul it. He doesn't have to annul it because she had no right to make the vow in the first place. And why is that? Because everything she earns belongs to the husband, the minimum. So how can she make a vow that you won't have any benefit from it? It's not hers to make that vow. That's opinion number one. Opinion number two, Rabbi Kiva says yafer. Rabbi Kiva says no, the husband has to annul the vow. Why is that? Because Shema Tadif Olav Yesa Min Alalai. He only is entitled to the earnings we said before, the weight of 5 sloim in Yehuda. But what happens if she does more than that? That ha'adafa, and that ha'adafa wasn't planned, it just so happened. And if it just so happened, the husband doesn't really have any rights to it. And therefore, if he doesn't annul that vow, it will become forbidden to the husband. And she has the right to make it, to sanctify it. So if he doesn't want it to happen, he better annul the vow straight away. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says that no, that I believe, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says that the husband has to annul the vow, not only because perhaps she has some excess, but even from the earnings itself. And why is that? Why have to worry about the earnings itself? The earnings itself, she has no right to make a vow, but because Shema perhaps, Shema Yigashena. What happens if you divorce her? Then all the vows that she made will come into play. And for Tehei Asura Lachza. True, right now the vow had no meaning, but the vow still is there. It will come into force. And what happens then is you can never remarry her, because how can you remarry her? It's impossible. We're not going to allow you to remarry her because of these vows where she said, I don't want you to have any benefit from me. We're scared that it's impossible for 2 people living in the same house and not to have benefit from each other. So we're not going to allow him to remarry her. So to avoid that problem, we strongly advise him that he should annul the vow right now. So
is that the rule that in Hafaras Nadarim that's only that husband or father only as long as she's in their house the Hafara lasts?
Because the reason why the vow is not an applicable vow from the Torah, it should have been a good vow. It's only because the rabbis came in and said no, that we want that all the earnings should go to the husband. So therefore the vow didn't disappear, because the Torah said it's a valid vow. So the vow doesn't disappear in this case. It's there. It's like it's riding there in the background. The moment that it's able to I guess, become effective, it does. So the moment that they're divorced, the vow is still there. She never repealed that vow. So therefore the vow is still there. So as soon as it's able to become effective, it does. And once it becomes effective, it's a valid vow, then he can never remarry her. And we want to remove that impediment. So therefore we suggest So according to Bechim Nuri, why are we telling him to annul the vow? Not because it has any effect right now, because one day in the future it might have effect, which is called a davar shaloi bala olam. And to avoid that, therefore we annul it now. So in other words, she's making a vow which is impossible to take place right now. It'll take place in the future, and that can happen, and it'll become Kaddish. And what's the problem with that? So there's three opinions. That's only Yechim ben Nuri. The problem is Lama Shmuel Halacha Yechim Nuri. Shmuel said Halacha Yechim Nuri, which means that he holds that she can sanctify something which will not take effect today, but in the future. So we see that you can sanctify a davar shlei b'laylam. How do you reconcile that din with the Shmuel who just said that on our Mishnah, that Halacha Yechim Asandar, that the excess does not, the husband made the excess Kaddish does not become Kaddish because it's davar shlei b'laylam. It's only after she passes away. So how can you reconcile these two shmuels? One place it says in our Mishnah says you cannot sanctify something in the future because it's not present, and in this place, when it comes to the Darim, she can sanctify her earnings even though it doesn't come into play until after she's divorced. And you're saying that then Shmuel says yes, then it's sanctified. How's it work? So the Gemara says, not a simple answer. The Gemara is going to go now and try to give a number of answers. First, the Gemara says, well, simple, I can say that even though Shmuel says, when he says halacha nuri, he meant only the halacha outcome of the nuri, but not for the reason that he said. Lahadafa, what he actually meant was the reason why what does nuri say? We want you to annul the vow. That part is right, annul the vow. But not because of the reason nuri said, because in the future, it will become activated. No, a davar shalei bala olam you cannot activate. But you know why we want you to annul the vow now? Because what happens if you made extra money? And the extra earnings will become sanctified because you have no rights over it. So it will become sanctified. So therefore, it's going to be all kind of problem. You have to start working out what you could have pleasure. You can't. It's very difficult. So therefore, annul the vow. That's what Gemara wants to answer. Says the Gemara, I don't know if that's what Shmuel is trying to say, that I don't mean follow Rabbi Yechim ben Nuri exactly what he said, only his outcome, but not for his reasoning, then I have a few questions. Relema, he should have just said, halacha Rabbi Yechim ben Nuri, but only, and then add the reason, lahadafa, because we're worried about the excess, for example. Or say, inami say, ein halacha kitana kama. Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yechim both agree that the husband should annul it for different reasons. Rabbi Kiva says because of the excess, Rabbi Yechim says because it gets divorced. The bottom line is we don't follow Tanakama who says don't worry about it. It's not a valid vow. So just say ein halacha k'Tanakama. Halacha is not like Tanakama. Or inami or halacha ki Rabbi Kiva. Just say it straight out. In fact, what you're really saying is that Shmuel rules like Rabbi Akiva. So just say that. So we're back to our question. Why in our Mishnah, when it comes to the husband, do we say that no, that Yechon Sandal is right? You cannot be makdid davar shaloi b'laylam. And why, when it comes to the Dorim by Yafar, there you say that she could be makdid Yechon Nuri for after the time that she's divorced. What's going on here? Now, El Rabbi said there's a difference between the two. In this case of the neder, is talking about a case of Kainim, where she says, "This is usher to my husband." In the case of the Mishnah, is talking about a general case of hektish. This belongs to the Beis Hamikdash. It's forbidden for everybody. In the case of this woman, she's saying to your husband, only to you it's forbidden. Kainim, to you, I want it to be like a carbon. I don't want you. I will benefit from it, not you. In our Mishnah, is talking about the husband said everything that you earn will become, or excess will become hektish. So it's hektish for everybody, for the husband, for the wife, for everybody. Here we're talking about a neder, kainim, saying, I don't want you, my husband, to have any benefit from my earnings, but I can have benefit. That's a whole different story, and therefore that and because that's a whole different story, it needs to, in order to become effective, it doesn't need as many ingredients as a case of hegdus, which is ubiquitous, which is for everybody, and therefore, so this says Rabbi Yosef. There's two concepts. We have a concept called a davar shaloi bala olam, something which is not yet in existence. We have another concept which is called eina b'shusay. It's not in my control. And the law is, we're going to learn about Baba Kama in the 7th parak, that Rabbi Yechina says that a person cannot, ish ki yakdish ez beisay. You can only make hegdish your own house. So the Gemara learns out. Ma beisay b'shusay, av hegdish b'shusay. In order to sanctify something, I have to be in control. It has to be in my domain. If it's in somebody else's domain, I cannot make, if a Ganav stole something, I cannot make it hegdish because it's not in my control. Rabbi Yosef is in the comment is going to equate the two. Just like you cannot make hegdish something which is not in your control, so too you cannot make hegdish something which is not in existence. It's the same logic because it's not here. Where is the hegdish going to land on? Where is it going to what's it going to coincide with? There's nothing here. Okay, so therefore what? Shiny kunmas. Kunmas is different. Kunmas is different than a normal case of hegdish. If I make something hegdish for the whole world, if I don't have control, I can't do it. So if it's not in existence, I can't do it. But when it comes to kunmas, even when I have no control, I can do it. For example, I can say to you that your fruits are forbidden to me. Now, do I have any control over your fruits? No. But when it comes to a neder, a vow, I can say, I'm going to proscribe your fruits to me, right? So therefore, I have the capacity when it comes to a neder to make it effective, even if it's not in my domain. So too, I have the capacity to make a neder if it's not in existence. Because Rabbi Yosef equates the two. And therefore, that's what the case over here with the woman is. Rabbi Yosef, Kunmas Kambit, you're asking a question from a neder, from Kunmas. Kunmas means it's like a carbon, shiny Kunmas. Kunmas is different. We'll have the first mission of Durham, the origin of the word kumis. The word is different. I cannot go and make your fruits hegdish. Who am I to make your fruits hegdish? But I could say that your fruits are forbidden to me. I'm making a vow that your fruits are forbidden to me. So since I can make a vow on something which is not in my control, so too I can make a vow that something which is not in existence to become holy. So the woman can say that those earnings that I have, after I get divorced, should become kodesh, and it's effective. It's effective then, even though it's because I'm making a neder. Amalei says, I don't understand what you're talking about. You're comparing, if I go and I say your fruits are forbidden to me, you're comparing that to a case where a woman is saying that the earnings I'll have after I get divorced should become hegdish. How can you compare the two? Why not? You know why I have the right to interdict your fruits to me? You know why? Because since I have the right to say that my fruits are forbidden to you, and that everyone agrees I can do, so therefore give me since I can make a relationship between you and me, my fruits are forbidden to you, so too, by the same token, I can say that your fruits are forbidden to me. Makes sense. I can forbid my fruits to you. So therefore, what do you call it? Sorry. Since I can answer your fruits on me because I can answer my fruits on you. Okay, so that makes actual sense. Makes sense. However, you want to say is and therefore you want to conclude that I have the right to forbid something which does not exist, that the woman can say that this, even though it's not in existence, should be forbidden to you. What's the connection? Over there, when it comes to a neder, that I say my fruits are forbidden to you, so therefore your fruits are forbidden to me. It makes sense. However, in this case over here, it's totally different. Because this is not in existence at all. If the object is not in existence, how can she make a neder on something which is totally non-existence? No, why not? Because I didn't earn it yet, and it is, and nor is it in existence. The earnings that I'm going to produce later is nothing's here. What am I talking about? Your fruits at least are here. Says the Gemara, she can ain't adam whatever. Yes, she can ain't. In fact, you know what I would compare it to the Baya? The following case. Can I go ahead and forbid your fruits to yourself? Of course not. Or can I forbid your fruits to somebody else? Of course not. And that's what this is compared to, because her earnings in the future, there's not an existence. My earnings are not in existence. There's nothing here. She says here, she came. I'll compare it to Ein Adam Al Chaveri. You cannot forbid the fruits of your friend on your friend, and that's what this is comparable to. When a woman says, and therefore my question goes back: and was that according to Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri, the kunmas will be activated in the future. And the question is, how can Shmuel say that? Shmuel holds that you cannot sanctify something in the future, and yet by the woman he can, and there's nothing in existence. He cannot compare it to something which is not in your domain. Here it's totally non-existent. The earnings in the future, there's nothing to talk about. So the Gemara says further, and to go back to our original question, what's the difference between our Mishnah, where Shmuel says that I hold like Rabbi Yechon and Hassan that you cannot sanctify something which doesn't exist, and the case of the woman where she sanctifies her earnings, and Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri says, but in the future when she'll be a divorced woman, she will earn the money, it'll be her own, and then the hekdesh will be chal. How? But right now there's nothing here. So Gemara continues. So the next generation came along. Elam Rabbi Huna Yeshua comes along Rabbi Huna, which is a biased student. Rabbi Huna Yeshua, and he said, "I'll give you a better answer." But I met it. She actually said, "Yikachu yodai la'asayim." She said that my hand should become sanctified to its creator, to Hekdesh, to Hashem, and therefore there is, even though the earnings itself hasn't happened yet, that'll be in the future. But that which will produce the earnings, which is my hands, is already in existence, and therefore that's different than in our Mishnah here, and therefore over here Shmuel can say, I hold like Rabbi Yechon ben Nuri that it will become kodesh in the future because there is something here at least. So okay, she wasn't divorced yet, that part is true, she's not divorced yet, so that didn't happen yet, but what did happen is her hands, that which is going to create all this, is already here, is partially here. Part of it is here, part of it is not here. Therefore, Rabbi Yechon says it is effective, it works.
How can you make Kaddish that part of your body?
You can. You could say that the Maisa Yodai, that's the part. There's the Gemara in Hamafkid we're going to learn that even though you're by when we say those who hold, Rabbi Huna holds that you cannot make something holy that doesn't exist, but a tree that will bear fruits, you can say that the fruit should become holy, even though the fruits haven't grown yet. Why not? Because the tree is already in existence. And because the tree is already in existence and it's going to produce the fruit, there's somewhere where this sanctity can actually take effect. The same thing, the hands. The hands is that which is going to produce whatever it is in the future. And the hands are in existence. So therefore, it is somewhere where, I guess, the hegdish or that vow has where it can attach itself to. And that's what it does. Says the Gemara, that's what the Rabbi Huna wants to ask. Why this case is different. The Yadayim Mista Ba'olam, in this case here, he said that the hands should become holy. And the hands are here. Not like in our Mishnah where the husband just said that her earnings should become holy, and the earnings are not here yet.
Wouldn't that mean, if you're saying it's kosher, it's why they say him, then
Sorry?
If she's saying
she said,
my
hands should become
right.
like say Mr. Hashem.
Right. So that means anything that is made with the hands will be
No. She meant the earnings. She translated. It means the earnings. My hands will produce the earnings.
Any earnings whatsoever.
Yeah, those work, whatever it is. Yeah, that's what she means. Yeah. Where are we? Sitting more further, we're still not happy. Sorry, I'm still playing. Thinking about the chikamra hachimi makacha. You think that's good enough? As long the lines that you're asking. Hamishab delay. But right now, whatever her earnings are belong to her husband. How can the vow chal? So the Amra, she actually said l'chi migrasha. She said, when I will be divorced and I have control over my earnings, I want that should all become kodesh. Says the Gemara. It still doesn't make it still called a loy bala olam. Because the fact is, does she have control to be divorced? Not at all. It's up to the husband to divorce her. So she has no control. So at the moment, even if she wanted to make her earnings kodesh, it wouldn't be, because it's not hers to make kodesh. So how can the neder then chal in the future? Says Gemara, if she wanted to make her earnings today holy, it would not happen, because she has no control of it. But in the future will be kodesh. The question goes back. It's a loy bala olam, as Shmuel said before. That doesn't work. Says Gemara, Sorry, Amar Ablalai answer. I'll show you a precedent. Yes, that is, even though today I have no control, but if I'm saying talking about the future, it can happen. For example, a guy says to somebody else, "I'm about to sell you a field, but I want you to eventually I'm going to buy back for you. And when I buy back for you in the future, Tik Kadesh, I want it at that moment, at that juncture, it should become holy." And the law is me loikacha, it will become holy, even though right now it's not by me. I'm selling it to you, so I cannot make it now holy because I'm selling it to you. And nevertheless, if I said when I buy it back, it should become holy, it will become. Same as the woman, even though right now she cannot sanctify it because her handiwork belongs to her husband. But she's saying when I get divorced, anything that I did will become holy. I'll do become holy. Why shouldn't it be effective? Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Maskal of Yemima says, Midami, how can you compare the case of the woman to the case of selling a field? Why? Hasam over there, the Yada Lahagdisha. Right now it's his. He doesn't have to sell it to him. He's selling a field to somebody. If instead of selling the field, he decides to give it to Hagdish, he can do that. Okay, so because at the moment he has that option of making it holy, and he delays it, he says, "Look, I'm going to sell it to you, but when I repurchase it, it's going to become holy." Makes sense. But in the case of the woman, while she's already married, and while she's making that vow, she cannot at this moment, if she wanted to donate it to Hagdish this moment, she couldn't because she has no rights over those earnings. So therefore, how can it be effective in the future? If it's not effective today, how can she make it effective in the future? It's completely libel. Says Gemara, Midami Hassam, the case of sale, he has the right to make it Hagdish right now. She has no control of divorcing herself. She has no control of the situation. So right now, she couldn't make it Hagdish if she wanted to. All the Rishonim ask, of course, she could have made it Hagdish. If she tells her husband, "I don't want you to provide for me, so I therefore earn whatever I earn is mine," and then she can give it to Hagdish. So Taisha's answer, simple answer, we're trying to accommodate all the opinions. Remember, Rish Lakish before said that no, it does not become that the woman has no right to tell that to the husband. So according to Rish Lakish, she has no option whatsoever at this moment. So the Gemara, it's not compared. Ella, I'll tell you what, I'll try to give another answer. I'll compare it to the following. In fact, the Gemara says over here, if you want to compare it to a case of a sale, I'll tell you what we should compare it to. A person says to a friend, that field which I sold you last year, same thing with the woman, she's already married. Well, I'll buy it back, it should become holy. The like culture, the law there is also. Doesn't it become Kodesh? It does. Now, right now, he has no control over it whatsoever. He already sold it, and yet he can say today, when I buy it back, it should become Kodesh. The same thing with the woman. Right now, she's married. She has no control. She cannot get out of the marriage right now on her own. Needs a husband to give her the get. So he has no control over it. And yet, and therefore, the law should be that she could make a Kodesh for afterwards. She could do that because their hands are still in existence on. Masculine, Papa said, Papa, I'm still not satisfied of this comparison. Me, dummy, how can you compare? In the case of the field, Hasam Gufa Upedis Biyodu de Lekech. Over there, what do you call it? In the case of you sold a field, this is all part of the question. In the case of you sold a field, everything now is in the buyer's hand. The goof is in the buyer's hand, the pear is in the buyer's hand. Hoch over here, Gufa Biyada, who over here, the hands are hers. It's the earnings that come from the hand that belong to the husband. So Holadami, if you want to really compare our case of the woman, I will compare it to something else. Someone says to his friend, Sadazu, this field, this field that I gave you as a mashkin, I gave you as a pledge for a loan that I had. So when I will buy it back from you, take kaddish. When I redeem it for you, I'll pay you back the loan, whatever the loan is. It's kaddish. It should become kaddish, and the law is the kacha. It will become kaddish, and that's the same thing over here. Same thing over here. Now, therefore, she has the right to make it kaddish because in this case of a mashkin, a pledge, It's not like a sale where it completely belongs to the other person. No, the mashkin still belongs to me. I have the option of paying money and getting it back. So it still belongs to the owner of the property, even though we gave it as a pledge, security to somebody else. So the same to the woman. The woman over here, the hands are still hers, even though all the earnings go to the husband. And therefore, she's capable of making a vow today, which will not take effect until later after she gets divorced. But it's effective, just like the case of this pledge, which is very different than our Mishnah, where the husband over there just says her future earnings, which he has no control, which is loy bala olam at all, with the excess, which is only after. He didn't give the stipend. It's only after she dies. He has no control over it today whatsoever. That's a real loy bala olam. But in the case of the woman, it's because the hands that can do the earning are here, and she's the one who's making the vow. It's similar to the case of a pledge where partly belongs to the borrower still, and he could make a vow for the future. When I redeem it, I want it to come hagdish. Says I'm still not happy, satisfied with that comparison. How can compare? Over there, this borrower, as soon as he has the money to repay the loan, he can go to the lender and say, here's your $100 that I owe you, give back my property. So he still has control. On the other hand, in the case of the woman, she has no control. She can't tell the husband, you have to divorce me. It's not up to her. It's not since at least before Rabbeinu Gershom, totally not up to her. And therefore, she has no control. So how can she make a vow today? How can Shmuel say, I follow Rechem and Uri, that even though it's loy bala olam, it's effective? Says the Gemara, mi dami hasam over there in the case of the pledge, she has control. Here she has zero control to divorce herself. Says the Gemara, dami, if you want to compare it, I'll tell you what we can compare it to. Compare it to the following case. Someone tells his friend, I'm giving you this pledge for 10 years. It's called in the Gemara, and we'll learn in Ezer Neshech B'Metzia, a mashkanta de besur. And I'm giving you a pledge for 10 years, and then I'm going to take it back. So right now I have no control. I can't come over to you in the middle of the 10 years and say, here's the money and give it back to me. Because that was that arrangement. The arrangement is you're going to have it for 10 years. But then I'm saying, when I redeem it, I want to become Kaddish. So right now I have zero control. And yet the law is when he takes it back, it becomes Kaddish. It's the same thing with the woman. You're right. She has no control right now, but yet, just like over there, it's effective. Her vow, the vow there about the future, to make it, to consecrate it. Same thing here. So he says, so this field, Shemashkantel gave you a mashkin for 10 years. When I redeem for you to kaddish, it should become holy. The kutcha, the rule is it becomes kaddish. So that's why we explain why this is different. Why Shmuel would, even though generally speaking, loy bala olam, you cannot make it hegdish, but here it's different because she has the hands are here, and even though she's not really in control, she still has some. It's her hands, just like a pledge where the field is still essentially yours, even though you have no control, and you can make it hegdish for the future. Says I'm still not satisfied. Maskul Ravashi said, Ravashi, I still don't understand. Mi dami, how can you compare Hasam LaSashani, mi biyadu livdaisa? Over there, at least the end of 10 years, he can get the field back. So therefore, at least in the future, he's guaranteed to be in control. He's not in control today, but definitely be in control tomorrow. But here, she's never in control. She can never force the husband to divorce her. So one second, because she's never in control, so right now it's completely loy bala olam. Over there, because he's in control, at least in 10 years when I get the field back, so you can never say that it's loy bala olam completely. There's still a partial. He has today a right, or he has today ownership that in 10 years will eventuate. She has zero. She has no idea if she'll ever have the right to own her own earnings. If the husband doesn't divorce her, she never has it. So therefore, how can her vow be effective for the future?
Hey, good question. What he says after 10 years, if they're not because the culture. So that means it becomes sanctified when? From that date or from the...
No, when he gets it back. Only when he gets control. When he regains control, he doesn't get it. He goes straight to Hegdish.
Right. So, okay. Because it's also not in his hands because he might die tomorrow.
Oh, then it's children. It doesn't matter who it is. Whoever ends up with it, it's the same story. The children have to abide by it. It falls on the estate itself. And he has some connection to it still, because he'll definitely get it in the future. So it's already a floating ownership. Well, you don't, but she has zero ownership because it could be she'll never be divorced, and she can't in any way force that situation. Okay, so more further. Elam Ravashi. So you see how we're going through the generations trying to work it out. Finally, we come to the final generation of the Gemara Ravashi. And Ravashi said, I'll explain to you why the case of the woman with a vow is different. Elam Ravashi. Kunmis Karmet, you're trying to compare our Mishnah where the husband says, I want to make it Hegdish, which is for everybody, to compare it to Kunmis where she makes a vow to the husband, I don't want you to have any relationship. Kunmis is different. Why? The Gdushas Hagufninu. There's two kinds of sanctifications. One consecrations. One is called, we had this in Psachim. One is called Kedushas Haguf, and one is called Kedushas Dami. Kedushas Dami is where you say, I want the value of this animal to be Kodesh. So the animal itself is not a carbon. You sell the animal, and with the money, you donate that to the Beis HaMikdash. That's called Kedushas Dami. So the animal itself essentially is not holy. Kedushas Haguf is where you say, I want this animal to become Kodesh. That's called Kedushas Haguf. When it comes to Kunmas, when you make a vow and use the word Kainim, you're saying, I want it to be like a carbon. So what are you saying? I want that this itself should become holy. And what happens is when you say that this itself should become holy, it completely unravels any other connections, any other liens, encumbrances that are on this, are all disappear. Because you now made this essence. When you have an encumbrance on something, it's not the thing itself, it's the value of the item. I have a lien on this property. It's not the property itself, it's the value of the property. But when you make it Kedushas Haguf, you're saying that, but this property now itself became holy. So as a result of that, whatever other encumbrances are there, they all disappear. And therefore, when she goes ahead and says, what do you call it? Kunmas, so therefore, it's so holy, it becomes that it will take effect in the future. So why? Because it as the Gemara explains, kumas garment, shiny kumas, is different. The gdusha gufninu, you're making the goof itself holy. Ukadarava, like Rava, the Amar Rava said, hegdish. If somebody decides to consecrate something, to make it hagdish, and or let's say chametz, or let's say, for example, you just you said to this lender, this animal here is going to, I'm going to pay you this animal. If I don't have money, you're going to have this animal. And then sometime during the loan, I turn around and I say, this animal should become a carbon chatas, become a carbon oil. You made the animal itself holy. What happens is the malva, the lender, no longer has any right to collect from this animal, because now that I made the animal in essence holy, it completely removes, it severs all other encumbrances, and there's nothing else tied in. And therefore, the lender has to collect his loan from somewhere else. Okay, and so maybe it's like stealing. You're stealing it from the lender. You told the lender, I'm giving you this animal. It's not stealing, because as long as the lender didn't collect it yet, it never really became the lender's. It's merely a lien on the animal. And now that I made the animal holy, that disappears. And the same thing with chametz. What do you mean by chametz? Let's say you told someone, a goy, that you're gonna, if I don't pay you, the lien is gonna be on all the whiskey that I had. Comes Pesach, you didn't pay him, or the loan isn't due. The Easter of chametz comes and completely takes away the shibud of the goy. So now we will treat this whiskey as chametz she'over olav Pesach. We don't say, oh, it was the goy's chametz and therefore it doesn't matter. No, it's chametz over Pesach, and you now have any hanor from it whatsoever. We had in our psachim that if you took the whiskey and you actually placed it in the guy's house, even though it was only security, that's different. But as long as it's sitting in your house, chametz came along and unraveled the shibud that you gave to the guy. And the third example is shichur. If you took your servant and you said, you told the lender, you're going to collect your money from the servant if I don't have the money to pay you, and then you set this servant free, the lender can no longer go to the servant and say, you belong to me. It doesn't work that way. And you'll have to collect the money from elsewhere. So therefore we're saying, because it's so powerful, this woman, therefore, if she goes ahead and says that I am kainim, that my work after we get divorced should become holy, her hands itself become kodesh, and therefore it works. It's mafkia the shibud of the husband, and it works. Says the Gemara. But when does it take effect? Only after she's divorced. But the obvious question is, if you're telling me that Hegdish is so powerful that it completely undoes any other encumbrances, so it should become Kodesh today. Why only after she's divorced? Because right now it belongs to the husband. But you just said that there's a lender there and you do this Hegdish thing, it completely unravels it. So why doesn't it unravel with the husband? Why wait until she gets divorced today? Everything that she earns should become Kodesh. Says the Gemara. If so, the Nigdush Mahashka, why do we say it becomes Kodesh from today? The Gemara answers, Almu Rabbanon l'shibude the Baal. The rabbis came along and decided that the connection between her and the husband should be very, because of shalom bias, that you want him to provide for her and everything else. They decided to strengthen to reinforce the obligations they have to each other, and this obligation of her to him, that their earnings go to him, to the extent that it does not become kodesh from today, only when she gets divorced. But on the other hand, it's not completely to say that she's not in control, and therefore it's not really loy ba'lo'olam. Her neder is chal, but not today, tomorrow, when she is divorced, if she gets divorced, because today the rabbi came along and gave that extra enforcement that you cannot undo what the husband did. Actually, it's quite complicated, the Gemara. So I hope you all followed. Okay, now we get some easy Gemara. Say the Gemara further. Now, I'm not sure how you're going to repeat this whole Gemara to your wives, but this is what the Gemara says. These are the obligations. So till now we learned what the husband has to do. His wife, he has to provide for her, and he has to take her rent, or pay her ransom, and pay for her burial costs and all that. The following malachas is what a wife is obligated to the husband. That's 7. Toichenes, she has to grind the wheat and flour. Oife, she has to bake. Mechabeses, do the laundry. Mevasheles, do the cooking. Menika es beno, she has to nurse her son and not go get a wet nurse. We had that a few days ago regarding the different customs. She has to, and in fact, the Rishalmi says, Menika es beno, she has to nurse the child, but if they're twins, you cannot force her to nurse. Matzas lahamita, she has to make the bed, and va'oise betzemer, she has to, this is what we learned before, she has to go ahead and produce the wool, the 5 slime. If they have a cleaning lady that comes in every day, which jobs then does it remove from her? She no longer has to do she doesn't grind, she doesn't bake, she doesn't wash. Why these particular 3? Taiz already says, and other Rishonim, because these 3 are the ones that make her not look so pretty, and therefore, and these are more difficult. We take it away from her. No more laundry, no more baking. Baking is hard work. And no more grinding. Shtayim, if you have 2 cleaning ladies or 2 maids in the house, then ein mivashelis. He no longer has to cook either. The ein menikas b'no, nor does she have to nurse her child. You can bring in a wet nurse. Sholish, you have 3 maids in your house. Then what else gets reduced? Ein matzas lahamita. She doesn't have to make the bed anymore. The ein oise b'tzemen, nor does she have to do the bare minimum. Basically, she does nothing. Arba, but therefore, Yesheva b'kitadu. Now she can sit on a stool and do nothing. Now, the obvious question is, 3 already, she's doing nothing. So what are we adding by having a 4th maid? How can you do less than nothing? So Rashi already says, I'm paraphrasing Rashi here, that even though she doesn't have to do these 7 major obligations, but still the little things, if he asks her, please go upstairs and get something, or other little things she still has to do. But if there are 4 maids, even that she doesn't have to do. She can sit in the stair and do nothing. That's the first opinion. Comes along Rabbi Lezen says, I disagree. You can have 100 maids. She still has to do something. Let her still have a little job. Do something. Why? If a woman does nothing, a woman of flesh does 0, it will lead her astray, and who knows where she'll end up. So therefore, you have to give her some purpose in waking up in the mornings, and this is the bare minimum. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, if forget about maids and everything else. If a man says to his wife, I don't want you to do anything. I don't want my wife to do anything. I don't want to go to work. I don't want to have a job. I don't want you to do anything at home. I don't want you to knit, nothing. He should divorce her and give her and pay her out. Why? If you don't allow your wife to do anything, it will make her crazy. It'll make her crazy. A person has to produce. A person has to do something, and if you don't allow her to do anything, it's not gonna be healthy for her, and therefore you have to divorce her. Now, how Rab Shimon Gamliel is different from Lezer, the Gemara will talk about next few days. Okay, Gemara. First thing is the Gemara says techenes. She has to stand there and grind. You know how it is. Who grinds? We have a mill that basically grindstones. She doesn't grind. So Gemara says Haggadah. Gemara says you're right. Ela ema mitachenes. She prepares it all in order to put it into the millstone, but she doesn't actually stand there and grind. Or anybody say they used to have a hand grinder, and maybe it means with a hand grinder. Says the Gemara, Masnis, and our Mishnah argues the like Rab Chia. Our Mishnah argues with Rab Chia. The Tani Rab Chia said, Ein Isha Elul. The role of a wife is to be a trophy wife. She's only there to be beautiful. She doesn't have to lift a finger and do anything. Number one. Number two, the other thing about is he says, Ein Isha Elul Abanim. The main purpose of a good wife is someone who raises good kids. Let her spend the time and raising the kids and bringing kids into the world and so on. And Rab Chia goes further to say Rab Chia, Ein Isha Elul Tachshita Isha. The only thing that a woman has to pursue is make sure she has nice clothes and nice jewelry. And it continues. If you want your wife to look beautiful, give her linen to wear. You want your daughter to look beautiful as well, to look like glisten. Give it to eat chicken. Give it to drink a lot of milk. Right before puberty. Now, the same Gemara Rab Chia in Yevamos we had. If you remember, Rab had a difficult time with his wife. Because whatever he asked her to make for supper, she would always make the opposite. And Rab Chia, his uncle, had to say a similar problem. But yet Rab Chia was such a mensch that every time he traveled abroad, he would come back and bring a present to his wife. Rabbi Grono told us that every time he traveled overseas and he saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe reminded him that he must bring back a present to his wife. So he must always, so Rab Chia used to bring back a present to his wife. And Rav said to his uncle, she gives you such a hard time. She drives you bananas. Why are you so nice to her? You go and buy it and then wrap it up, not just buy something. You wrap it up and with all the love and affection. So he said, because the Dayal Isha, it's enough for her that she raises the children, brings up the children, that's it. But that argues our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says there are obligations that a wife has to the husband, and some of them actually will affect her looks. And Rab Chia says, no, let her look beautiful. Says the Gemara. She nurses the son. Even though she refuses, the husband can force her to nurse the son because obviously it's much healthier and better. Says the Gemara, our Mishnah does not conform with Beis Shammai. I'm not exactly sure what the Gemara's question is because we had a million times that Beis Shammai is not really a Mishnah. So what does it matter if the Mishnah does conform with Beis Shammai or does not? But for whatever reason, here the Gemara decided there might be a problem. Our Mishnah does not have a consensus because Beis Shammai doesn't agree. What's the story of Beis Shammai? The Tanya we learned, let's say Nidr, she made a neder, she made a neder, I will not nurse. I don't want to nurse. It's painful, whatever. I don't want to nurse. Beis Shammai says, shemetes dod mepiv. The neder is a valid neder, and you you don't allow the child to nurse from his mother. So in other words, Beis Shammai holds that it's not an obligation for a woman to nurse the child. Not like our Mishnah that says clearly that there is such an obligation. Beis Hillel says, koife umanikta. Beis Hillel says, no, it doesn't matter if it has a vow or not a vow. You can force her to go ahead and nurse the child because the vow is not really a valid vow because it's an obligation that she has. These garsha, what happens? She's divorced. She was divorced. Now, big argument whether she did. Are we talking about a case where she made a vow, or even if she didn't make a vow, but she's divorced and she is not comfortable for whatever reason? She doesn't want to nurse a child. What happens then? It's his child and her child as well. What happens then? Einu kaifa. He cannot force her any longer to go ahead and nurse. She no longer has any obligations to him. It's up to her. V'im haya makira, but if the child already recognized the mother and doesn't really want to nurse from anybody else, then we can force the mother to you can force her to nurse, but you have to pay her for her time or for the effort, or especially if it's painful for her, you have to pay her. So what right do we have to force her? Because the child's life is in danger. especially if there was no, if the child's not comfortable to go anywhere else, the child's life is in danger. They didn't have formulas in those days, full baby.
If the child's life is in danger, does the bishop have to tell us you can force some? It's pretty obvious.
What do you mean? You can give it to a wet nurse.
Oh, okay.
And then, and then whatever, try to work something out, try to work it out. But we're saying that it's difficult with a wet nurse and it's much easier to go with a mother. So in that case, we're not talking about, I guess, that there's no alternative, because then you're right. Says the Gemara. So what does he clear from here? That Beis Shammai is of the opinion that her vow is a valid vow. She has no obligation to nurse the child, not like our Mishnah. Says the Gemara to try to work it out. I feel how you take Beis Shammai. We can make it work like Beis Shammai as well. We're talking about over here. We had this Gemara before as well. In a case where she makes a vow and he supports her, who is then the primary, I guess, or who's the most culpable there? Or who's the primary person who makes the vow? The one who she made a vow, but the vow itself doesn't really stand unless even if he's quiet, he has to, he has to support her, or at least not to contest it. So who is actually the main culprit here? Her or him? In fact, the Even Ezra writes a Chumash in Parshas Kedoshim that the one who fences stolen goods is worse than the ganef itself, because the ganef would never have stolen if it wouldn't have been for the fencing. Same thing here. She can make the neder. She did the action, but it's meaningless unless he supports it. And that's the argument is. Talking about a case here where she made a neder, I don't want to nurse, and he didn't object to it. So Beis Shammai holds, because some Beis Shammai, who knows an ezra. It's as if he made the neder. So what right does he have to make her? It's different than our Mishnah. Our Mishnah, a normal case, she has obligations. But the case that we're talking about here is where she made the vow and the husband accepted it. So Beis Shammai says, as if he made the vow, what right does he have to come to her and say, I want you to go ahead and nurse the child? But Beis Hillel holds, he knows the ezra, even though he agreed with it, the fact is that she made the vow, and therefore she has an obligation to nurse the child, and the vow is negated. Says the Gemara, if so, the niflaga, what then? Why talk about a specific case? We're talking about a general case now where she makes the vow and he supports it. And the question is, so who do we consider here as if he made the vow? And why talk about a specific case about nursing? The niflagu b'ksuva b'alma. Just talk about generally that she made a vow. I have nothing to do with him, and he supports it. So the question is, now they have to divorce, because if you made a vow, you have nothing to do with him. I don't have any benefit. How can you live together? But does she receive a ksuva or not? If she made the vow, she forfeits a ksuva. If he made the vow, then he has to pay her out. But in this case, she made the vow, but he supports it. So how do we treat that? So let's just argue that. It's the same question. Is it as if she made the vow, as if he made the vow? That's question number one. But furthermore, Tanya, we learned in the Brisa clearly, Beis Shammai says that even without a vow, Beis Shammai says, Eina Manika, she doesn't have to, if she refuses to nurse, she doesn't have to. Clearly not like our Mishnah. Somebody says, you're right. It's much clearer. Mas Nisan, like Beis Shammai. We will go back to our original statement. Our Mishnah does not conform with Beis Shammai.